Good evening and welcome to this webinar on how to use algebra. More specifically, in this webinar, we're going to focus on helping you answer questions on inequalities and absolute value. This is a fairly application-focused webinar, and to make sure that you're well equipped to handle the kind of content we're going to present in this webinar, we did send a few video lessons your way. The video lessons were on absolute value, absolute inequalities, quadratic inequalities, and then linear inequalities in one and two variables. If you've not gone through these video lessons are a part of your free trial. Post the webinar, just log into your e-GMAT account, go to the Quant section and take a look at these video lessons. Let me close this over here. We also have some upcoming video lessons. We have a free session on how to use GMAT's intense correction. That is tomorrow at next Saturday at 7 a.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. IST. Probably our most popular session. In this session, Payal would talk about how can you use GMAT's intense correction by focusing on meaning and logic. And again, she'll solve some of the most challenging intense correction questions that the test will likely throw at you. If you're aiming for a high score on GMAT Verbal, it's one session that can actually help you get a jump start on that. Similar to today's session, we have another quant session next week, which is on number properties. And again, as we're going to do in today's session, we're going to start from the very foundation of algebra. And in the session next week, we're going to start with the very foundation of number properties, more specifically primes and LCM GCD. And then we're going to extend a unified approach to solve the easiest or the most challenging questions over there. Now, while doing that, we will look at why you make mistakes, what causes mistakes. It's more often than not, it's not the conceptual knowledge, but certain habits. We're going to try and help isolate those habits so you can work on the same. So again, you can click on register now to register for those. And then, since we have a fairly large group, we'd like to get to know you guys a bit better. The first question that we have is, when do you plan to take the test? And the next question that we have is, what is your target GMAT score? Let's get these responses. These questions allow us to understand the makeup of this group as a whole, and it allows us to modulate the webinar to your needs. All right, based on the data that I have over here, we have a fairly, it's an evenly divided group when it comes to when people plan to take the test. We have a few folks who plan to take the test in the next 15 days. Then we have, I'd say, almost an equal number of people in the next 4 segments, starting from 16 to 30 to those who have more than 75 days. That's wonderful. The nice thing about this is, even if you have the exam in the next week or so, the methods that we talk about, if you hone on them, you can actually see an improvement in as few as a couple of days. With regards to the target GMAT score, 730 to 750 bracket, the biggest group over here. I'm really glad to see that, because 730 onwards is the score that we recommend if you're aiming for top B schools, which is schools ranked number 1 to number 25. And again, if you are aiming for schools which are ranked from number 25, 26 onwards to 50, 700 to 710 is a score that we recommend. It puts you in that safe group, but make sure that you get some scholarships, potentially full fellowships if you have a good profile to go along with it as well. So I'm really glad to see that. With that, let's go right into the webinar pane. And as I go into the webinar pane, I'm going to introduce the e-GMAT team over here. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your co-host today. Supporting us in this webinar, we have Sandeep. Sandeep is a subject matter expert at e-GMAT, and he's also going to be your co-host today. Your main host today is going to be the other co-founder of e-GMAT, that's Payal Tandon. She is GMAT Club's top-rated instructor. She's actually more reviews in the last couple of years than any other instructor has had. And she's also the author of e-GMAT Quant as well as e-GMAT Verbal course. With that, Payal, over to you.
Thank you, Rajat, for that introduction. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Payal Tandon. I will be your host in this webinar here. Let's just make sure that the audio is absolutely clear at your end. So please click yes if the audio is clear. All right, sounds good. All right. So again, there's, let's carry forward here. Okay. Let me just get to the right slide. Since quite a few of you attended the webinar yesterday, we skipped a certain introductory part of our session here. This will be part of your PDF packet that we share with you towards the end. But let me just come down to the correct screen here. Bear with me for a minute, for a couple of seconds. In the meanwhile, let me just ask you, what's your target quant score? So why don't you fill in these bolts in the meanwhile? I'm going to broadcast the results here. All right, here we are. So the largest segment here is aiming for, so I'm clubbing these groups, 49, 50, 51. So that's where the majority of the class is. So that's good. All right, so that's your target score. Now, obviously, getting to 49 requires a certain skill set. Going from 49 to 50 requires a step change. And then 50 to 51 is primarily honing in and making sure that you have that precision when you are answering questions. So good. Let's look at what your current quant score is based on the assessment that you've done so far. All right. So the largest segment here is in Q31 to Q45 bracket. So we have almost similar number of people in Q31 to Q40 that are there in Q41 to Q45. Okay. Some of you are in Q46 to 48 bracket, but yes, so most of you need to get to that 49 score or beyond based on what your target score is. All right, good. Now, tell me, what is the biggest problem that you face in quant today? And I'm going to get you a poll in which you can put in your answers. What's the biggest problem that you face in quant today? What is stopping you from getting to that target score? Or what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about, oh, I need to improve my quant, but I can't get this? Accuracy, time, inequalities, data sufficiency, time to solve hard problems, time management, time to solve hard questions, all right? So ability, silly mistakes, application, what method to use. Okay, too long a question. All right. Very excited and do the questions wrong. Application and what method to use. Okay, how is it that you're preparing for quant today? What is your method of preparation for quant? And an answer could be that, you know, I know I learn the concepts and then I go practice questions. Okay, GMAT Club Math Book, basics, review formulas, and then practice. Concept plus application, practice questions. Manhattan Study Prep plus GMAT Prep, I'm guessing, okay. Concepts and then application, okay. Let me ask you this. Some of you are talking about the term application, and that is something which I believe is used only by e-GMAT. So let me ask you, how many of you are e-GMAT students here? And let's just clear the polls here. Click yes if you are an e-GMAT student. Okay. Sounds good. So about majority of the class is composed of e-GMAT students. Okay. All right. Let's carry forward. I think I have, let me ask you one more question about, specifically about your comfort level in algebra. Select what is your current comfort level in algebra. Because we are going to be specifically talking about algebra, I want to know where you rate yourself in algebra today. And I know you are looking at the number 200% and greater than 100%. That's just my way of saying that you are absolutely clear with everything that is there in algebra, and you can solve difficult questions correctly, consistently. So majority of the class is at 80% level. Quite a few of you are actually below that level. All right, sounds good. These are the results here. All right. So now what's the purpose of this session? What we're going to talk about is how do you apply concepts in the context of the GMAT questions. I'm not going to be teaching you concepts. These concepts were provided to you as part of your free trial, as part of your preparation for this session. How many of you went through the concept files that were provided to you? The inequalities, quadratic inequalities, linear inequalities, and absolute values. Okay, about half of the class did. All right. So again, we will do a quick warm-up review of these questions, so that of these concepts, so that you get that feedback as to where you need to focus on in terms of your conceptual understanding. Okay, and then we'll start with the application part of this webinar, which is the primary part of this webinar, where we'll talk about, given that you have this understanding of the concepts, how is it that you apply those concepts to solve questions? Okay, and after every set of questions, you will be taking down key takeaways that you're going to be applying throughout your quant preparation. Now, the learnings that we have in this session, yes, I'm going to give you those learnings from the standpoint of algebra, but they are not limited in scope to just algebra. They actually span, they are applicable across the board for all of quant. Okay. All right, so how are we going to go through this? I'm going to give you a warm-up quiz, as I said. This is composed of 6 problem-solving type questions, and then we'll take up 6 difficult problem-solving questions, followed by 3 difficult data sufficiency questions. Okay? So let's get started with our warm-up section. Now, I typically don't time you, but how I'll do this is I'm going to give you the question, and I want you to click on still solving. That way I know how many of the 100 students that are there in this session right now are actively engaged in solving the questions. When about 50% of the class has selected the answer, I'm going to give you a 10 to 30 second warning depending upon the difficulty level of the question. Okay, so let's get more people to click on still solving. Let's get this number to at least 40. Okay, almost there. Just one more. Okay, all right. There you go. This is your first question. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Here comes the poll for question number 2. Sorry about that. Let's remove the results. Can you all please click on still solving? All right. Here's question number 2. Go ahead. All right, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Here comes question number 3. Please click on still solving. All right, here you go. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. I'm going to show you question number 4. Okay, there you go. Please click on still solving. All right, here's question 4. Oh, I give you question number 4 after I discuss these questions. Sorry about that. All right. So, how were these questions? Did you feel confident? How many of you felt confident about answering these 3 questions? Click yes if you felt confident. Okay, good. Most of you felt confident about well, 67% of the class. All right, so let's talk about these questions here, and I'm going to show you the answers that you select. For question number 1, your performance was absolutely wonderful. So when I say absolutely wonderful, not absolutely, but it was pretty good. It was best amongst all the other questions. 77% of the class got the question correct, and this one is relatively straightforward. You move minus y to the left side, that way you collect all the like terms at this on the same side. You get 4y plus 10y plus y is greater than 0. Now you move 10 to the other side, you get 5y is greater than minus 10. You divide both sides by 5, you get y is greater than minus 2. Now, for those of you who got this question wrong, I want you to make a note of this, that you have certain issues with solving basic inequalities. So you need to review you need to learn the concept, right? So that's my feedback to you. And there's quite a few of you who got this question wrong, or who were not able to solve the question in the first place itself. There are 5 of you who were not able to select the answer within the designated time, and I gave you ample amount of time to solve this question. Okay, let's look at question number 2 now, and let's get the poll for question 2. So again, the correct answer here is choice B, y is greater than -2. Now in this case, you have system of 2 inequalities. So you need to be comfortable. So the concept that we are testing is, can you solve a system of 2 linear inequalities? Okay, and the accuracy for this question is less than the accuracy for the previous question, because this is a little bit more involved than the previous question, because there are 2 inequalities now. So again, you multiply one inequality by 2, you essentially bringing both the inequalities in similar form, so that you can cancel out stuff, and then you add the 2 inequalities, and then what you end up getting is y is greater than -2, because that's what you needed. You needed to calculate the range of, you needed to find the range of values of y. Okay, so there were quite a few of you who were not able to solve the question, but a number of you could not solve the question correctly. So again, my feedback to you is that you need to learn the basics of inequalities. Okay. All right, let's move to question number 3, and definitely question number 3 was more involved than these 2 questions, and the accuracy for this question was really low. The correct answer here is choice C. Okay, 3 non-negative integral values of m. So essentially, in this question, you solve for m, and then you figure out how many of those, you figure out the range of values of m, and then you see how many of those are actually non-negative integral values, non-negative integers. Okay, so when you solve both of these, what you get is 4m is greater than 10. When you solve both of these, where you faltered over here was, you probably said 4m is greater than 10, and that is where the mistake was. You cannot really, when you're multiplying both sides by a negative number, the sign of the inequality changes. So the correct answer here is 4m is less than 10. How many of you flipped the sign of the inequality when you did this, when you solved for this? So quite a few of you, so all of those who are answering actually flipped the sign of inequality, which is good, and that is the main thing that we are talking about in this question. Okay, that's one of the main things. The second thing is, when you figure out m is less than 10 by 4, you calculate, okay, what does that mean? If m is less than 10 by 4, how many non-negative integral values are possible? And over here, the answer 0 is a non-negative number. For those of you who selected choice B, probably did not consider 0 as a non-negative integer, and that is why you got this question wrong. So there are two main learnings that come from this question. Once you know how to solve a system of inequalities, the 2 learnings that you get from this question are, first of all, when you multiply both sides of the inequality by a negative number, you need to flip the sign of the inequality. That is something which I want you to write down in your notes in caps, because that is a very, very important property to solve inequalities. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing, you need to understand the constraints that are provided to you in the question statement. Non-negative integer values include the number 0. So this constraint understanding is applicable across the board, across all of Quant. So please make sure that you understand that. How many of you made the mistake of not considering 0 as a non-negative integer? All of those, I'm pretty sure all of those who selected choice B made that mistake. So where you faltered was that you knew that inequality, how to solve inequalities, but you didn't know how to apply the constraints. You weren't aware of the constraint that non-negative integer values places on the question. Okay. Now, my question to you is, if you answered when you're practicing, how many of you maintain an error log? How many of you maintain an error log when you're solving questions? Quite a few of you. Now tell me, if you answered this question incorrectly, what would you put in your error log? Some of the entries that for this, so some of the columns for this entity will be that inequalities, right? That's one thing. It's an easy question that you got wrong. But what would you put in as a reason? First of all, how many of you put in the reason for why you made the mistake? Okay. Not many of you, very few people, less than half of the class puts in the reason for why you made the mistake, and I want that to change from today onwards. It's very important that whenever you're solving questions, you write down why is it that you made the mistake. After you've reviewed the solution, you need to write down. Your solution review should be that thorough that you should be able to write down why exactly you made the mistake so that you don't make that mistake again. So I see over here quite a few good ones as the reasons. Carefully read the constraints, that is good, but I would want you to also write down that 0 is a non-negative integer. So here the process scale, essentially each error log entry should have a process scale and the concept scale. The concept scale, if you selected choice B despite getting to m is less than 10 by 4, is that you didn't know that not that 0 is a non-negative integer. That's the conceptual knowledge that you were not able to apply here. Process knowledge is that you weren't able to apply the constraints correctly, right? So those two things are very, very important. Okay. Um, Inequalities reverse when multiplied by negative number. If you faltered at that point, good, you need to write that down. That is a conceptual understanding that you need to have, and that would go into your concept error there. Okay. Silly mistake. Silly mistake is not an error log. It is not a reason to answer a question incorrectly. There is nothing that is a silly mistake. If there is a mistake, it is a serious mistake, because remember, a serious mistake is what you take seriously. If you write something as a silly mistake, then you are not going to take that seriously. Okay, yes, it's a terminology thing, but it's very important to make sure that you don't let yourself go easy on yourself. You have to be very critical of yourself. That's why every mistake is a serious mistake. Okay, so good. Thank you for the inputs that you're giving me. Really nice. All right, so let's now move to the next segment and keep a track of the questions that you're getting correct and the questions that you're not getting correct, because at the end of the warm-up section, I will give you a poll to put in how many questions you got correct. Okay. And also maintain a log of why is it that you answered those questions incorrectly. So in a sense, what I want you to do is I want you to create your error log for the questions that you're answering in this session. Okay. All right, let's now move on to next question, and I'll give you the poll for that. All right. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. And I'm going to give you your next question. Please click on still solving for question number 5. Here's question 5. All right, last 10 seconds. I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so let's discuss these two questions. How are these two questions? Were you confident about these? How many of you were confident about your answers for these two questions? Quadratic inequalities. Okay, so the confidence level has gone down for quadratic inequalities. All right, so let's talk about question number 4 here. What's the range of x for the inequality x minus 2 times x minus 3 is greater than 0? Now this is a quadratic inequality. 66% of the class got the question correct. For those of you who were not able to solve this question correctly, or who weren't able to select any answer, you do need to work on your skill set for to solve quadratic inequalities. So that's my feedback to you. Okay, so let's go through this. So again, I'm not going to be going through the solution in detail. I'll just breeze through it. This is a concept that you need to learn from the concept files that are part of your free trial. Okay. So really what the question is asking is, when can the product of these two numbers be positive? Now, when is the product of two numbers positive? When is the product of two numbers positive? X minus 2 is a number, x minus 3 is a number. Right? So when both are positive or both are negative? Absolutely. So that's how we come up with our two scenarios. Okay? When both x minus 2 and x minus 3 are positive, and when both of these are negative. And that's where we come up with the possible ranges. So here you get the range as x is greater than 2. That's one of the values here. Right? And x is greater than 3. When you combine those two, you really get x is greater than 3. Likewise, you do the same thing for the other condition, and when you combine this, you get x is less than 2. So the correct answer here is choice C. Okay. Now the answer format over here requires you to convert these two parts of the ranges into the set over here. Okay. So that's a typical conversion that you do in this set form. Okay. Now, Now the same question can be solved utilizing Wavy line method, and I'm just going to walk you through that over here. The details of the Wavy line method have been included in an article which I'll share with you. So essentially what you do is you plot the points 2 and 3, which are the roots of this equation on which are the roots of this inequality on this number line, and then you essentially figure out in what range you have these 3 segments. One is this segment, the other is this segment, and the other is this segment. In which segments is this part positive, because that's what you're looking for, right? So in this case, so essentially that's how you work with the Wavy line method. Again, I'm not going to be explaining this to you. This Wavy line method is based on the method that we used in the previous slide, but it's just a more quick way of solving a quadratic inequality. So once you do get comfortable with how quadratic inequalities work, it's a good idea to go through this method, because this is an application of the basic concept behind how do you solve quadratic inequality, and this can really save you time on the test. Okay, so now let's come to question number 5. This was an interesting question. Only about 59% of the class got the question correct. So the accuracy for this question was lower than the accuracy for the previous question. Now tell me, what is the form of this inequality? What is the form of this inequality? X minus 3 divided by x plus 4. It's a fraction, absolutely. But how do you deal with this? It's not a linear inequality. It's a fraction. But what type of inequalities are you familiar with? What types of inequalities do you know how to solve? You know how to solve linear inequalities, you know how to solve quadratic inequalities, right? Beyond that, we don't have any other type of inequalities within the context of the GMAT, right? Now, how would you convert? Can you convert this inequality into a linear inequality? Can you convert this into a linear inequality? No, you cannot convert this into a linear inequality. You can definitely, now if you say that you can convert this into a linear inequality, by that what you probably mean is, I can multiply both sides by x plus 4. Is that what you mean by that? Can you multiply both sides by x plus 4? Yes or no? The answer is no. Why is that? Why can you not multiply both sides by x plus 4? Because you don't know the sign of x plus 4. Absolutely. You don't know the sign of x plus 4. And that is why you cannot multiply both sides by x plus 4, because if x plus 4 is negative number, then you'll have to flip the sign of inequality, right? But if x plus 4 is a positive number, then you do not flip the sign of inequality, right? And that is why you cannot do that. But what you can do is, you can convert this into a quadratic inequality by multiplying both sides by x plus 4 whole squared. In that case, why can you do that? Because x plus 4 whole squared is always, why can I multiply both sides by x plus 4 whole squared without worrying about the sign? Because x plus 4 whole squared is always positive, right? So that's what I do. What I end up getting is a quadratic inequality now, okay? And then I apply my Wavy line method, or the method that, or the basic conceptual method, and I get my answer as choice C. Okay. Now the thing in this question is, if you got this question wrong, what would be the error log entry that you make? If you got this question wrong, what would be the error log entry? What concept? You'll probably write inequalities, but what in inequalities were you not able to do? Essentially, what you were not able to do was, you were not able to translate this, you were not able to simplify this given inequality into this form. So the skill that you were not able to apply here was simplification skill. Okay, this has got nothing to do with whether you know how to solve inequalities, whether you know how to solve linear inequalities or quadratic inequalities. The stuff that you're talking about over here is, can you, given a complicated expression or given a complicated inequality or equation, can you simplify it by applying the conceptual understanding that you have in the form that you can then solve? Okay, so this is the bit which you were not able to do if you could not solve this question correctly. Okay, now definitely to do this part, you are applying your conceptual understanding. But if you think about it, you know that once you learn this, you know that multiplying both sides by a negative number in an inequality requires a change of sign. Right, you know all of that stuff, but it's just that you were not able to apply that stuff in the context of this question. Okay, so that exact learning has to be put in your error log. Okay, so converting fractional inequality into quadratic, that is a good one. Good. Okay. Fractional inequalities, yes, but I would say, converting fractional inequality into a quadratic inequality, that is the process skill. That is the simplification process. That's the detail of that simplification process skill which you need to put in your error log. Okay? All right. So that is why, that's how you would solve this question. Okay, now I see that there are some of you who are posting detailed analysis over here. Please put that in the Q&A part so that Sandeep can give you one-on-one attention. The stuff that you should put in the short answer poll is really the responses to the questions that I'm asking. Okay, so any of the detailed stuff that you haven't understood, for example, I know there's one student who said that he doesn't understand why D is not correct. So please put that question in the Q&A part. Okay. All right, so let's now move to question number 6. I'm going to give you the poll for that. All right, can you please click on still solving? Hey, you guys know the drill now. All right, there you go. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So this is absolute value inequality, relatively straightforward question. Again, multiple ways to do this. I substituted x plus 3 as z. Z is less than or equal to 5. I visualize this on the number line, and then I basically substitute back x plus 3, and then I solve both sides of the inequality here, and what I end up getting is minus 8 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 2. Okay, so again, it's absolute value concept. What it is, it's the interpreting absolute value as distance between 2 points on the number line. Okay, all right, so that's about it. Now let me ask you this question over here. How many questions in this section did you get correct? All right. So for those of you who got all the 6 questions correct, your conceptual understanding is good when it comes to inequalities. Okay. For those of you who got fewer than 6 questions correct, even if you got 1 question wrong, I want you to tell me why did you make a mistake. So why don't you take some time, for those of you who weren't able to answer all the questions correctly, tell me where is it that you faltered. What have you taken down as notes for yourself? Because this is the kind of analysis that you need to do when you're practicing questions, when you're building your ability on your own. Okay. And when you say conceptual misunderstanding, I want you to tell me which concepts. Okay. Very, very important. Did not know how to convert the fraction question. Good. So you need to work on. Okay, so let's get a few more over here, and then I'm going to tell you how I would interpret each of these. Okay. Okay, let me take a few. Did not know 0 is non-negative integer. Good. So this would come under the category of process skill of applying constraints. Okay, so process skill of applying constraints, that is something which you weren't able to understand. That is good. Then got confused between addition of inequalities. Now this is your basic concept skill that you don't know how to solve inequality. So this is a conceptual gap that you need to bridge. Okay. Speed has no place in your error log, and I'm being very, very blunt here, because again, I want to make sure that you're preparing for your exam in the right manner, and speed has got nothing to do with you getting the questions wrong. Today I didn't put you under any timing constraint. Okay, you should have been able to solve. If you were not able to solve the question within the designated time, this means that there is a big conceptual gap that you have. Okay, so you need to identify that. Okay, identifying how to simplify, that is good, but you need to be more explicit. One of the columns in your error log has process skill as the issue, so that process skill is simplification, but you need to add detail in the other column to indicate what kind of simplification were you not able to do. In this case, you were not able to simplify a fractional inequality into a quadratic inequality. That's the simplification that you were not able to do. Okay. Now in wavy line method, I forgot to take into account the negative sign. This is a conceptual issue. Okay, so you need to bridge, you need to build your conceptual understanding of how is it that you solve quadratic inequalities. Okay, so applying concept of absolute value, again, this question was a very basic application. So if you were not able to solve absolute value inequality question correctly, question number 6, then you need to write that down under conceptual gap, because you need to build your conceptual understanding of how is it that you solve absolute value inequalities. Okay, approach is very broad. You need to specify what kind of approach. Okay, still need to strengthen concepts. That's good, which means that you need to build on your conceptual understanding. That is good. Adding 2 sides of inequality, that's a conceptual gap. That needs to come under your conceptual gap of inequalities. You need to build your conceptual understanding. Okay. So what I want you guys to take away from this is that right now I have about 100 people in this session, right? Each of you solve these questions based on what your current level of comfort in conceptual and process, from conceptual and process standpoint. But the kind of mistakes that you did really depended upon whether it's a particular process skill that you're not able to apply, or whether it's a particular conceptual skill that you were not able to apply, right? Now your corrective action from this point on will depend on what was the cause behind you answering that question incorrectly. So the same set of 6 questions, but the kind of corrective actions that you're taking depends upon where is it that you faltered, and identifying that is very, very important. Okay. Now let me ask you this. How many of you do this kind of analysis when you are practicing on your own? How many of you think about it in this manner? Not many of you, very few of you think about it in this manner. And that is why how many of you feel that no matter how much you practice, you're not able to improve? How many of you are stuck there, that you keep practicing, but you're not able to improve? This is the reason why you're not able to improve. This is one of the reasons, I would say, okay, that when you're solving questions, you're not going into the depths of why is it that you answered those questions incorrectly. And right now, think about it, we're just in the basic warm-up phase, right, of this session. I haven't even gone into actual GMAT level questions. Okay, these are just warm-up questions, and this is where just in those warm-up questions you were able to extract so many things about where the gaps in your understanding are. Okay, now how is such level of error log creation possible? It is possible if you review the solutions that are detailed enough, that are provided to you from the standpoint of the process that you solve. Okay, only those solutions can help you do this kind of strategic review. Okay, and this strategic review is applicable across the board in verbal, in quant. Okay, and that is why doing that level of review from the solutions that are set up in the manner that we want you to solve in the exam environment, that is how you'll be able to figure out, okay, what kind of, that is how you'll be able to identify those error log entries. Okay. All right, so now let's move on to our next section. Okay, this is what I was talking about, the wavy line method application. Sandeep can share the link of this one through the Q&A pod with all of you. Or I can share this link as well. So again, after you have built your conceptual understanding of quadratic inequalities, go to this article and read through the wavy line method. Okay. All right, now we come to GMAT style questions, and again, I understand that those of you who have conceptual gaps will continue to falter, because again, without bridging those conceptual gaps, there is no point in solving difficult questions correctly. But I will still suggest stick around in this webinar, see what other kind of feedback you can get. Okay, once you build your conceptual understanding, what do you need to do next in order to get to that next level? Okay, so take that as a learning from this session. Okay, don't worry about answering questions correctly. Still think about how is your focus should be on how is it that you can improve when you're practicing on your own. Okay, does that make sense? For those of you whose conceptual understanding is solid, definitely your focus should be on making sure that you're getting questions correct, utilizing the correct method, the right method. Okay. Now I am actually curious. Initially, when I asked when I was looking at your responses, quite a few of you said, about half of the class said that you are already e-GMAT students. I'd like to know, what is your current e-GMAT course subscription? All right. Good. So majority of you are GMAT online students. Very nice. I have about 90 people in this session right now. So let's get more people in to respond to this question. The reason this question is so important for me is that I want to make sure that as you're going through the course, you are going through it in the right manner. That's very, very important. Okay. So now tell me one thing, for those of you who are, for those of you who are GMAT online students, how many of you have done the Quant course, have actually started the Quant course? Okay, so you haven't, okay. Okay, half of you, only half of you have. Okay, thank you. That is very helpful. Okay. All right, now let's get into our next question, and let me get the poll for this. Let's just get a pulse of the session here, a pulse of the class. How are you guys liking the session so far? I know we have just gone through the warm-up section, but tell me, how is it that what is it that you're liking in it? And So far so good, loving it. Okay, good. All right. Perfect. So let's solve this question now, and let me get the poll. I know for those of you who have strong conceptual understanding, I know you might feel that this is going a bit slow for you. I apologize for that. It's just that I have to go with the masses here. But now that we are going into difficult questions, you will see the pace of the session increase a bit. So let's click on still solving here. All right, I'm going to show you your question here, question number 1 in the GMAT style questions category. All right, last 10 seconds. I'm going to end the poll now. Good, 70% of the class got this question correct. So again, over here, you've been given this linear inequality. You need to find the range of x. There's no constraint on the value of x. And again, just make a note of how I am explicitly stating, explicitly looking for constraints. That's very important, okay? And in this case, I am saying, okay, I read the question statement and I realize there is no constraint on the value of x, which is good. Okay, so now I simply rearrange the terms, and here I get the negative sign, right? So I need to multiply both sides by a negative number, which means I need to flip the sign of inequality. And I am really happy to see that quite a few of you were able to apply this concept over here. So you got the question correct because you were able to successfully apply this. So choice C is the correct answer. X is less than -2. Okay, now here, yes, I have written down silly mistake over here. Why I've written down silly mistake is that there is no other way. Basically, the person skipped the sign of minus over here. Yes, so he didn't he solved the question correctly, but he didn't transcribe it correctly over here. So yes, I shouldn't technically call it silly mistake. The student needs to be very, very careful whenever he's selecting an answer choice. Okay, so let's now go into our next question. Now one of the inequalities for the next question is the same as this inequality. So you don't need to spend the time in solving this. You can take this solution with you, x is less than -2, with you to solve the next, into your next question. Okay? There you go. Here's your next question. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so this question, the accuracy for this question could have been 76%, but 34% of the class, quite a few of you, missed out on very, very important skill here, which is applying constraint. Okay, so let me go through the solution here. So essentially, you need to find out the minimum value of integer x. Now it's minimum value of integer x, and look at the choice that 34% of the class selected, minus 5.5. Do you see where you faltered? Those of you who selected choice A as the correct answer. Do you see where you faltered? And why did you falter here? Why did you falter? Not an integer. Minus 5.5 is not an integer. Didn't pay attention to the integer. And remember, I very categorically showed you my previous question here, solution here, constraint. I'm making an explicit note of the constraint here. Okay. And over here in this question, this is what you needed to do. You needed to make note of the constraint. And this is the process skill that you have to apply. You have to learn. How do you applying constraints is a very, very, very important process skill. Okay, that's where you missed out this question. That's why you missed out this question. Okay, it's nothing to do with your conceptual understanding of inequalities. You know how to solve inequalities, but for those of you who selected choice A, you got this question wrong because of the process skill. And that's something which you don't pay attention to. How many of you would have simply noted this question down as a silly mistake in your error log? If you had gotten this question, you did get this question wrong. How many of you would have simply logged this as a silly mistake? Right? And that silly mistake is not going to help you. Identifying it as a silly mistake is not going to help you is not going to make sure that you don't repeat this mistake. Okay? Detailed solution review is what is going to help you not make this mistake again. Okay. All right. So again, I'm not going into it's a relatively straightforward question. Two linear inequalities. You're simply solving them to find out the range. Okay. X is greater than minus 5.5, which means that the minimum value of x, and x is an integer, is minus 5. Okay, now some of you also selected choice E as the correct answer. Okay, that or minus 3 as the correct answer, choice D. So what I would say is that most of you got this question wrong because you were not able to you didn't pay attention to what's given. For those of you who selected minus 3, you took the maximum value of integer x. Okay, you didn't pay attention to the fact that this is a negative number, so minimum value is actually larger absolute number here. Right, so all of you got the question wrong for the same reasons, except for those who were still solving. Those people, I would say, you still need to build on their conceptual understanding of inequalities. Okay, but most of you who answered the question got this question wrong, not because you don't know how to solve inequalities, but because you could not apply the constraints. Is that correct? Yes or no? All right, so for the rest of your GMAT prep, and absolutely for the rest of the session, make sure that you write down the constraints explicitly. That's your process skill that you need to build. Okay. Now, the next two questions will be back-to-back, question number 3 and 4. So there is a slight difference in the two questions. So I want to make sure that you read the question statement carefully. So this is question number 3. Let's get all of you to click on still solving. Okay, and here you go, question number 3. All right, last 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end this poll. And here comes your next question. Please click on still solving. Here's question number 4. Go ahead. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. All right. So let's go back to question number 3. What is the range of values of z square given that z square plus 4 times z square minus 2 is less than 0? You can solve this question with both wavy line method and the fundamental approach. I'm going to be using the fundamental approach here because you guys don't know, many of you don't know about the wavy line method. So fundamentally, what is it that the question is asking you to do? Product of two numbers is less than 0, right? That's how it is. So when is the product of two numbers less than 0? In what scenario is the product of two numbers less than 0? When one is negative and the other is positive, right? Absolutely. When one is negative and the other is positive. Okay. Now in this case, can z square plus 4 be negative ever? Can z square plus 4 be ever negative? No. So the only number that can be negative in this case is z square minus 2. Right? So the only number that can be negative is z square minus 2, which means z square is less than 2, which means z square is less than 2 is greater than or equal to 0 is the correct answer. Choice D is the correct answer. Now for those of you who selected choice A, 23 people who selected choice A, you simply looked at this inequality and you didn't consider the conceptual constraint that z square puts on the solution. Okay, you simply took, okay, z square plus 4, z square minus 2, so basically minus 4 is less than z square is less than 2. You didn't apply the conceptual constraint that z square is a non-negative number. Do you see a mistake? Yes or no? So in this case, I wouldn't say that you don't know how to solve quadratic inequalities. You do know how to solve quadratic inequalities, because if z square were not, instead of z square, if this was z, then your answer would have been correct. Right? Because there is no conceptual constraint that z has. Right? The z square has that conceptual constraint that it's always a non-negative number. So the reason why you got this question wrong was because you didn't apply the constraint correctly. And constraints need not be explicitly stated. There are two kinds of constraints: one that are explicitly stated, the others that come from your conceptual understanding. For example, z square is a non-negative number. Square of a number is always non-negative. But that conceptual constraint actually costed you this question. Okay. Now let's come to question number 4. Question number 4, okay, this is with the wavy line method, so let's go forward. Question number 4. If z is an integer, how many values of z square satisfy this inequality? So it's the same inequality, right? Well, now what is given to us is z is an integer. Okay, and we have to find the number of values of z square. Now, what we already know is, we know that, okay, let's come to this point. 0 is less than or equal to z square is less than 2. This is the solution that we have from the previous question, right? Now, how many, because z is an integer, what all values are possible for z? Z square could be either 0 or 1. So the correct answer here is C, which quite a few of you got correct. 50, well, I would say 52% of the class got this question correct. Okay, but again, if you missed out on the previous question, you would have gotten this question wrong as well, because you wouldn't have just known how to approach this question. Okay. So again, very, very important to identify, to not only have conceptual understanding of how is it that you solve inequalities, but also to have that process skills developed so that you can simplify stuff, you can apply the constraints properly. Okay, in these two questions, we notice the importance of applying the constraints properly. Okay. So let's just do a quick recap of questions 1 through 4. Again, making sure that we change the sign of inequality when it's multiplied by a negative number. That's a concept. A perfect square is always non-negative. That's your constraint. Wavy line method, that's your concept. Simplifying an equation to bring it to a known form, that is again a process skill. Focus on constraints on the variables, that's a process skill. Okay. All right, so again, what I want you guys to look at is, every time that you're preparing, every time that you're solving a question, you need to be very, very clear about whether you are solving a question incorrectly because of a concept gap or because of a process gap. Today, people don't focus on process gaps at all. They only focus on concepts, and they classify mistakes as silly mistakes, or they classify mistake as, timing issues or whatever. Those are not explicit enough to help you make sure that you can solve difficult questions correctly, consistently, in order to get to that Q49, that Q50, that Q51 score. Okay, so with this, let's come to our 700 level questions. Can you all please click on still solving? All right. Just so you know how many questions we'll be solving in this session right now, in the interest of time, we'll do one problem solving question, and then we'll go into our data sufficiency questions. We'll do 2 data sufficiency questions, and the third, so basically one data sufficiency question and one problem solving question I will give you as part of homework. Again, detailed solutions are there in this in the presentation. So you'll get about, I believe about all right, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So, how was this question? Judging the time that it took you to solve this question and the responses here, I believe the correct answer is the easy to falter, small things, challenging, difficult, not bad, easy. Okay, so let's go through this. Again, this is a bit more involved question, but as such, there is nothing intricate that's going on here, right? So let's go through this. So what you've been given are two linear inequalities in two variables, and you have to find the positive difference between minimum possible value of x and minimum possible value of y. That is something which you had to focus on. Okay, so let's do this. The constraint x and y are positive integers. How many of you identified this constraint, that x and y are positive integers? Yes, no? Okay, so almost all of you who are responding said that you identified this. How many of you used this constraint? Okay, all right, let's see whether you used it correctly or not. Let's do this. Now we bring these two inequalities in their standard forms, we solve the inequalities, and we find the answer. Now inequality 1, I bring it in this standard form, right, 1, and inequality 2 is here. Then I do processing. All I'm doing over here is solving this inequality correctly. These two inequalities, what I get is y is greater than 6. So I get my range of y. Now I figured out that okay, I have range of y, now I need to find the range of x as well. How many of you got y is greater than 6? Okay, so if you didn't get y is greater than 6, then you made a mistake somewhere while solving these two linear inequalities. Okay, so so you need to work on where you faltered. Okay, where you made a mistake in this solution. So this is a conceptual gap with regards to solving linear inequalities. Okay, next you then find out the range for x, and you get x is less than 8. How many of you got x is less than 8? Okay, so again, if you couldn't get x is less than 8, then you made a mistake somewhere while solving these two linear inequalities. Now, the next question is, we need to find out the positive difference between minimum value of x and minimum value of y. Now, what is the minimum value of x if x is a positive integer? If x is a positive integer, then the minimum value of x is 1. It's a positive integer. It's not a non-negative integer. Okay, it's a positive integer, which means that 0 is not the smallest value here. 1 is the smallest value. Likewise, if y is greater than 7, then what is the minimum value of, if y is greater than 6, then what is the minimum value of y? It is 7. Okay, so what you get is minimum value of x is 1, minimum value of y is 7. 7 minus 1 is 6. The answer is 6. So the correct answer here is choice E. Now let's take a look at how many of you got this answer. Only 9 of you could selected choice E as the correct answer. Now for those of you who selected -6, you didn't read this constraint that what you needed was the positive difference. Okay, so again, if you selected -6, then you didn't focus on the constraint that was there. Okay, that's the mistake that you did. Okay, and if you selected choice B, which was the more popular choice selected, then you took the max value of x. Maximum value of x is 7 here. So you simply took 7 minus 7. Okay. Now, tell me, why did you falter in this question? What would be your error log entry for this question? Negligence is not an error log entry. Falter due to positive difference. Okay. Didn't understand the term positive difference properly, so you couldn't understand the question statement correctly. You couldn't translate the question statement properly. That's where you made a mistake. Okay, so the process skill is translation. You could not translate positive difference correctly. Okay, so when you have your error log columns, the column for process skill will be translation, and the description for that will be didn't understand the term positive difference properly. Okay, write down the constraints. Constraints, again, applying constraints was an issue here. So applying constraints and then write down the detail of what it is that you missed. Okay, minimum value of integer 1, that's again understand applying constraints, right? So the detail over there is positive numbers. If x is a positive integer, then 0 is not a positive integer, right? 0 is not negative integer. That's something which you have to keep in mind. Okay, so let's now move on to our next. So question number 6 I will skip, and there's a very big reason for that. I want you guys to solve this question on your own, but after you have revised, after you have learned the details of quadratic inequalities, linear inequalities. So go through the concept files in detail, go through this session recording once more if needed, and then solve this question, because this is a very good question. It's a very involved question, and there is a lot of learnings that you're going to have as you go through this question, as you solve this question, right? But I want you to do that when you are ready to learn as much as you can from this question. And again, as I said, the solution is very detailed. You should be able to understand stuff from the solution. Okay. All right. So now let's go into our data sufficiency section, which happens to have absolute value questions in it. Okay. So let's get going. Can you all please click on still solving? All right. Here you go. All right, last 10 seconds. I say last 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, how do you feel about this question? Confident, not so confident, mind-boggling, easy, conflicted? Okay, confident, okay, unsure. All right, let's solve this. Now, when you solve this question, why did you feel unsure? For those of you who felt unsure, or for those of you who felt this question was tricky, what conceptual understanding did you feel you didn't have when you solved this question? Okay, but in terms of what the question is asking from conceptual understanding, what is it that you felt you were not sure about? Each option gave 2 solutions, okay. How do you compare info from question and option stems? Okay, couldn't solve for statement 1. Okay, now one thing with data sufficiency is you need to follow a again with problem solving as well, you need to follow a step-by-step method, but more so with data sufficiency, not because it's a complicated question type, but because we are not familiar with solving such, we're not comfortable solving such kind of questions, because all our lives, I mean, this is the first time ever that we came across a question that is in the format of a data sufficiency question. All our lives we've solved problem solving type questions, where you have a given question, given information, the question is asking you something and you have to select the correct answer. Here, amongst the given options, right? Typical multiple choice question. Data sufficiency is a whole different beast, and it's not because it's a complicated question type in itself. It's just that we are not familiar with this kind of question type. That's why following a step-by-step method is very, very important. And the first step always is to first understand the question statement itself. Is Z positive? Okay. And what we have been given is that Z is an integer such that mod of Z is less than 6. Okay, that's given to us. Z is an integer, that's a constraint. Mod of Z is less than 6. That is information that's given to us, which means we need to translate this information in easy to understand terms, and which is that, okay, if mod of Z is less than 6, this means that the range of values of Z goes from -6 to 6, which means there are 11 possible values, -4, minus 5, starting from -5 all the way to +5, including 0. Okay, so now the question makes a lot more, now we are comfortable with the question, that what we need to find out is Z positive. So we need some information that helps us make a determination whether Z is negative or positive for sure. Okay, now how many of you analyze the question statement to this degree? Okay, good. Now, let's look at statement number 1. Statement 1 tells us that mod of Z minus 2 is greater than 3. Okay. Now, in order for us to identify this, mod of Z minus 2 is greater than 3, what we can do is, and I'm going to show you this method over here, mod of Z minus 2 is greater than 3. There are 2 possible cases, the Z minus 2 is greater than 3 or Z minus 2 is less than -3. In those 2 cases, mod of Z minus 2 will be greater than 3. What you get from here is Z is greater than 5 or Z is less than 1 or Z is less than -1. So in this case, really Z is greater than 5. There is no integral value given what Z is. Z cannot be greater than 5, right? Because there is no integral value between 5 and 6. Remember, this is the constraint that we have from the question statement. -6 is less than Z is less than 6. Okay, so this means that this is not a possibility at all. This is not a possibility at all. Okay, so the only possible scenario over here is Z is less than -1, which means that statement 1 is sufficient. All the values are negative. So essentially, the key to solving this question is really, first what you have to do is you have to get to this level over here. Okay, you have to get to this level over here, that the two possibilities are that z is greater than 5 and z is less than 1. How many of you got to this level? Because translating z minus 2 mod is greater than 3 into these two ranges is your conceptual understanding with regards to absolute value inequalities. Okay, now once you get to this, so if you were not able to get to this part, then that means there's a conceptual issue. Okay, but if you got to this part and still could not process it further, then that is a process issue from data sufficiency standpoint, in that you were not able to take the information from the question statement and see how that information relates to the information that you've gotten from statement 1. The thing with DS questions is that you understand the information in the question statement should be carried forward into statement 1 analysis and independently statement 2 analysis. That is something which you have to go by. Okay, DS is all about you start off with given set of information, you add more information, and then you see whether adding that information to the information that's there in the question statement helps you answer the question that has been asked. It's as straightforward as that. Okay, now in this case, so that's where you faltered. If you were not able to get to this level here, that all values are negative, that's the point where you faltered. Okay, now let's take a look at statement number 2. Statement 2 tells us that z is, okay, so now here from statement 1, we know that statement 1 is sufficient, which means that the possible answer choices are A and D. Okay, A and D. Now for D to be the correct answer, statement 2 should be sufficient on its own. Now what does statement 2 tell me? Statement 2 tells me z is plus 2 and minus 2. Okay, so it tells me that z is both of these could be both of these values. So statement 2 is not sufficient. It doesn't help me answer the question, which means that the correct answer is choice A. Now tell me, what part of the solution, where did you falter when you solved the question? First of all, tell me, for those of you who selected choice A, did you select it for the right reasons? And by that, what I mean is, were you able to translate both the statements properly? Statement 1 has multiple values, yes, but then you also have to consider the values which the question statement bring in. Okay. And again, yes, you're right. Statement 1 tells that z is less than minus 1. Not z is not greater than minus 1. Z is less than minus 1. That's where you're making a mistake. So if you're making a mistake at this point, this means that you need to, the feedback that I'm going to give you is that you need to understand how to solve absolute value inequalities. Okay? Yes, absolutely. Z can be minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, minus 5. Absolutely right. Because we are combining the information from the question statement and the information from statement 1. Okay? So now tell me, why did you make the mistake? What is the error log entry that you're going to put for this question? Oh, so statement 1, again, what is statement 1 asking us? Statement 1 is simply asking us, is z positive? And the answer to that question is yes, z is positive. Answer to that question is no, z is not positive. Which means that you can answer the question confidently. Okay, process issue where? What part of the process did you falter on? Constraint application from the question stem. Okay. S1 is not consistent in giving positive value. Well, again, I think where you are having issues is what the data sufficiency question is asking you, is Z positive? Now it doesn't, so what you have to answer, the answer to this question is Z, can you confidently say whether Z is positive? Can you confidently say that Z is negative? That is how you have to look at this data sufficiency question. Okay, so it's very important to understand what is the question asking you. Okay, and in this case, you can confidently say that no, Z is not positive, Z is negative. I know for sure that Z is negative. Okay, so if you're still not able to understand it, then that means you need to focus more on understanding how to solve data sufficiency questions. Okay, that's very, very important. All right, so now let's move on to our next question, question number 8. Let's solve this question, and can you please click on still solving? I know you guys must be tired. We've been solving questions non-stop since the last, 1.5 hours. All right, here you go. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so how is this question? Select the wrong option, difficult, easy, good. Okay, let's go through it. What we have to find out is A less than B? Okay, there's nothing much to this question from the question statement. Simply saying is A less than B. Now, there's no constraint provided. Now, let's look at statement 1. Mod of A minus B is equal to B minus A. Now if you observe this, mod of a minus b, so mod of some number is equal to b minus a. So what does that tell you about b minus a, about this part here? If this number, b minus a is a number, a minus b is a number, mod of a number is equal to b minus a, so what does that tell me about b minus a? Tell me. That b minus a is non-negative, not just positive, and that is where you made a mistake. B minus a is non-negative. When y is equal to absolute value of a number, that means y is a non-negative number, which means y is greater than or equal to 0. Equal to 0 is what you missed out on. Okay, so the correct thing, over correct interpretation of this statement is that b minus a is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, that's the mistake that you did, which means that b is greater than or equal to a, which means that b can be either equal to a or b can be greater than a, which means that I don't know for sure whether a is less than b or not. Okay, because I know that a could be b as well, which means that statement 1 is not sufficient. So for those of you who selected choices A or D, you faltered over here because you did not consider that y is a non-negative integer. Okay. Now this entry in your error log could be either absolute value concept or constraint. Technically, it should be absolute value conceptual understanding because you were not able to keep in mind that if a number is equal to mod of another number, then that number is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, equal to sign is very, very important here, that y is a negative, non-negative number. Let's take a look at next one. A divided by b is less than 1. Now how would you process this information? Will you simply say that a divided by b is less than 1, which means a is less than b? Will you say that? Yes or no? Why can't we do that? If you're saying no, why can't we do that? And if you're saying we don't, absolutely, because b could be negative. If b is negative, then we'll have to switch the sign of the inequality. Okay, so really there are two cases here. Case 1 is b is greater than 0. Case 2 is b is less than 0. Okay, these are the two cases here. Okay, if b is greater than 0, in that case a is less than b. If b is a positive number, then you can multiply both sides by b without changing the sign of the inequality. That means a is less than b. Okay. But if b is less than 0, then when you multiply both sides by b, then you flip the sign of inequality, which means you get a is greater than b. So again, choice B, statement 2 as well results in two possible scenarios. So for those of you who selected choices B or D, again, you faltered here. You didn't consider both the cases. Okay. Now, let's combine the information from the two statements. The first statement said it presented us with two cases, A is equal to B, A is less than B. The second information presented us with two cases, A is less than B, A is greater than B. Now, if both of these statements are to be true, then the only way that both of these statements can be true is if A is less than B. Okay, so that means combining both the information, we can find the answer to the question that has been asked. Is A less than B? Yes, for sure we can say that A is less than B. That means the correct answer is choice C. Tell me, what's your learning from this question now? What would be your error log entry? Consider negative value for the denominator. Now think about this. This was an absolute value inequality, right? Question based on DS question based on absolute value inequality. Up front, when we were solving linear inequalities, and we were solving easier problem solving questions where we had to flip the sign of the inequality. Again, those are two different questions, but the reason why you got these two questions incorrect was because of the same issue, that you were not able to apply the aspect about multiplying both sides of the inequality by flipping the sign. We were not able to apply that concept. Okay. Absolute value can be 0. Absolutely. So that's a conceptual gap. So again, this is a relatively straightforward data sufficiency question. It doesn't require a whole lot of processing. All it requires is that 200% confidence in the conceptual understanding that you have. That is why it's very, very important to not just know the concepts, but absolutely understand the concept so that you can apply them across the board. So that whenever you see that thing, okay, it's a mod, automatically you need to go, oh, it's a non-negative integer. Remember, non-negative integer and positive integers are different. You know, 0 is included in non-negative integers, 0 is not included in positive integers. So that conceptual clarity, that 200% conceptual clarity is absolutely critical for you to solve any kind of questions in quant. Okay, and that razor sharp focus on the process skills, that's very, very important. Learning as you're moving from one question to another. Okay, that is very, very important. And again, question number 9 is along the similar lines as question number 8. I want you to solve this question after you understand exactly, so after you make sure that you have understood each and everything over here. Okay, so frankly, GMAT quant can be mastered very, very easily. It's just that you have to focus on learning the right stuff. You have to focus on, as you're learning the right stuff in the right manner. That is very, very important. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take up a couple of success stories, and these people have different starting points, so they had different needs, and how the e-GMAT quant course helped them build the gaps that they had in their understanding and get to their target score. Okay, now the first success story is for people who think they're good in GMAT quant, and there are quite a few of you who do believe that, and that's good, right? You do have a strong quant background, right? Now you should definitely take the chance to read his verified review on GMAT Club. And Krish had always done well on quant, but he was stumped by the GMAT. Okay, he constantly faltering while answering these questions, and he kept falling in those familiar traps. Frustrated with the lack of progress that he had, he made sure that he should change his approach. And that's when he started following a methodical approach and changed his approach to solving data sufficiency questions significantly. And after making these changes, he was able to improve his quant score to Q51, and that's the highest possible. And he ended up scoring a 740. Leonardo. He had not been very comfortable with quant, right? And he was stuck at Q45, despite trying really hard. He needed a high quant score because he wanted to apply to finance-based schools, such as NYU Wharton, as well as schools such as Stepper. To improve beyond Q45, he adopted a methodical approach. And you will see this common theme. It's the methodical approach. It's the methods that is so very important. He started consciously following the constraints. He focusing on the constraints, showing his work on paper. Right now, so I saw comment here, I solved everything correctly but forgot to look at A is equal to B, scratch paper was filled. Again, very important to take down notes properly. Okay, as you're solving questions, very, very important, because you don't want to lose out on questions just because you didn't follow a particular step in the process correctly, right? You don't want that, because you'll be penalized really heavily on the test, such as GMAT. Okay, so once Leonardo had the approach right, he made extensive use of analytics that Quant Scholarinium provides to isolate the areas that he needed to improve upon. Today, I've been focusing so much on what entry are you going to make in your error log. Why? Because as you're learning as you're solving every question, each and every question needs to be opportunity to learn. Okay, it's not about solving thousands of questions. You only need to solve a limited set of questions. As long as those questions are given to you at the right time, at the right level, as long as those questions have the right kind of solution, so that you can build each and every step of the process skill, each and every skill that is required. Okay, that's what Leonardo did. He focused on data. He focused on data that he got from Scholaranium, and he focused his energy on the questions that the data told him to focus on. Okay. Then he used the custom quizzing feature to ensure that he had actually improved, and that's what successful students do. They utilize data that is provided to them, and then they take the corrective actions right there and then. Okay, and because of his good quant score and excellent verbal score, he was admitted to Wharton, Stern, and Tepper, and he's studying at Wharton. The next story is of an individual who was extremely weak in quant. And again, the reason why I have these 4 success stories here is because people can come from any starting point, as long as the e-GMAT course is established works for people from any starting point. Okay, the key thing is that you need to use the course in the right manner. You need to know what the course brings for you so that you can utilize the course in the right manner. Okay. Now, Mazibar was extremely weak in quant. His starting score was Q30, a mere 20 percentile. Okay, and he spent a ton of time reading quant books, but he was not able to improve. Again, just going through the books is not going to help you improve his score. Okay, he benefited from the progressive learning architecture at e-GMAT, in which he was able to cement his basics before taking on difficult questions. Okay, and in case his basics were not strong enough, he was given appropriate feedback. Now, Mazibar was able to improve to Q45, which is 59 percentile in quant, and this was a huge improvement over his starting score. Guillermo's story is again an amazing story of an individual who had an extremely strong determination to study at top B schools. And again, you always have to make sure that you know what the end goal is, that end goal of 730, that 740 plus score, which will get you to your dream B school, which will get you to that dream job after MBA or your own initiative. So keep the eye on the ball there so that you know that the hard work that you're doing at this stage is all worth it. Okay. Now he started at Q38, which is coincidentally 38 percentile on GMAT Quant. He realized that he needed a stellar quant score to get an admit from Wharton and GSB Chicago. And the only way to improve from such a low score was to truly focus on learning, which he did using the video lessons, the lessons that we shared with you in the free trial, right? You need to go through those lessons so that you can then solve these questions correctly, right? You need to go through each and every module in Quant course. Starts off with conceptual understanding. So you first go through that video lesson, then you go through the application file in which we teach you how to apply those concepts, how to apply that standard 3-step process that we talk about to solve any kind of question regardless of the difficulty level of the question. Okay. He was short on time, so he used analytics that Quant Scholaranium provides to isolate the areas where he needed most help. Like Leonardo, he used the custom quizzing feature to ensure that he indeed improved on those topics. So again, using the methods, using the data that the system provides you, you will be able to improve to the target score that you're looking at. So in the end, to ace GMAT Quant, focus on learning and adopting good habits. Focus on utilizing the methods to solve each and every question, that one method that you use to solve each and every question. Focus on getting the right kind of information from the detailed solution. Every question that you solve needs to be an opportunity to learn concepts, to learn your process gaps. Okay, that is what is absolutely critical. Okay, and to utilize data to tell you where you need to implement corrective action. What do you need to focus on? Okay, so with that, I'm going to end this session over here. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A pod over here. I will invite Rajat back into the session so that he can come and take your questions. In the meanwhile, I'm going to share the PDF with you, PDF of this presentation, so that you can solve the questions, 4 questions in the presentation as your homework. So I would want you to put in your rating for the session. We take your feedback very seriously, and we conduct these webinars every weekend, and we want to make sure that we are focusing on the right stuff for you so that we can get you on the path of success. And all right then, so let me share the PDF as well. Here's the PDF, and I'm going to invite Rajat back into the session so that he can take any questions that you may have. And good luck for your preparation, and let us know how we can help you.
Guys, with that, I'd be happy to take on any questions that you have. I really like the feedback that I'm getting. Learn a lot of new concepts. Practicing hard questions is not needed. It's the process that matters, and that's really true. I mean, essentially, a hard question is hard because it requires the process. So usually, when you follow the process, what you're going to find is that essentially hard questions are just another question. Are there any promo codes or discounts? Again, you can just write to us if our sales team is offering anything. They'll be happy to share with you. Okay. If there's any other question. So one of the things that was there was that someone's asking is that, okay, is this all of algebra do you offer? No, this was about 20% of what we offer in algebra, actually even less than that. The paid course in algebra is a lot more comprehensive overall. And again, we don't like to give a lot of discounts. It's just, that's not the business that we are in. And then for the very simple reason that, hey, we don't charge $1,000 for our courses, even though we have way more reviews than courses that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And then even though we invest more in R&D and in technology than most of the other prep companies, actually pretty much every other GMAT prep company does. But again, the goal really is to make things affordable for everyone and not to worry about offering discounts to people. Okay, Rohit says, I realize I'm not able to apply constraints, would need to be more careful. Any suggestions? So Rohit, again, suggestions is, you do a strategic review as you solve questions, you look at the solutions, and it's about training your mind. It's like, hey, when I learned driving in the US, one of the things that was very hard for me is to look at stop signs, because when I learned driving in India, there were no stop signs in India. And again, you've got to train your brain to look for it. As you make mistakes, you make sure you get the right feedback. As you get the right feedback, our brain adjusts itself to identifying that feedback and then not making the same mistake again and again. But it's really important to take in that feedback. It's one of the reasons why we say that if you're joining this webinar, make sure that that you participate, because when you participate, even when you're wrong, you get feedback. There was a question which was there which says, hey, how long will I take to finish the course? I think the answer is it depends forever. So it varies from one person to the other. We've had people who've actually not finished the course, but really gotten to their target scores in 20 days and target scores of 740 or higher. And then we've had people who take 3 months. Again, the difference is their starting points. Someone who takes 3 months is going to is definitely starting at a much lower percentile than someone who's going to finish the course in 20 days. The other piece is the number of hours that you put in. So but on an average, on the quant side, if you want to cover most of the things for a majority of our students, you need about 100 to 120 hours. Ankit says, do we get mentors with the course who can guide through what we should avoid considering one's target score? So we have built technology platform that does that, and if you have a confusion, you can write to us, and yes, one of our GMAT strategy experts will respond to you. But we don't offer like one-on-one sessions if that's what you're asking. Typically, a one-on-one session with a GMAT expert costs about $100 an hour, and you can get sessions with experts who are not worth their salt, and they'll guide you in the wrong way. But to train a GMAT expert, it's about 4 to 5 months of full-time effort. So a good GMAT expert who can really look at data and tell you something that we offer. And so when you write to them, you build your study plan, step 1. Step 2, when you build your study plan, it automatically tells you how should you proceed. But if you have a doubt, you write to them, they'll analyze about 200 data points in your account and then give you a solution. So yes, you get mentors, but you don't get a one-on-one session with them. And again, look at our reviews, look at the kind of strategy support that we have. I'm going to actually share a success story with you of a student who we motivated he was happy with a score of 700. We motivated this guy to improve to 770, and he was able to do that in 3 weeks. And just really tell you how effective these mentors are. Here is something that's coming over your way. Do we have a 15-day program? We don't have a program by days, and we won't offer. And anyone who's offering a program by days is offering you a cookie cutter thing. Based on what you're starting and what your target scores are, we can do one of two things. We can tell you how long will it take for you to get to your target scores, and we'll give you good reasoning why it would take you that long, and we'll tell you where you would spend that time. Or if you say this is the amount of time that I have to spend in the next 15 days, we can tell you the kind of improvement you can actually achieve. Okay, Shivani has a really great question. How do we track our progress? So Shivani, I'm going to share some videos with you which have where these are case studies of people who've actually tracked their progress and have scored, gotten to really good scores. And then I'm going to tell you the principles that we use to track your progress. So take a look at that. You'd see the case studies. So when you're doing the course, you go through and you look at the scores on concept, application, and practice quizzes. That's what we call as stage 1 of learning. Then we look at either the scores on ability quizzes in Scholarium, which we have, that's an excellent way, or we look at, they give you easy, medium, and hard accuracies that you need to hit in stage 2 of learning. And if you hit that, you will have achieved the desired ability levels. Does that help answer your question? And again, look at those videos. You'll see enough evidence of people. The beauty of this is if you do stage 1 really well, if you do the concept files, the application files really well, what you would notice is that you don't need to solve a lot of questions. In fact, we wrote this article which says what causes success on the GMAT. And in this article, we analyzed 300 students who were successful, 300 students who were not successful. So an equal number of successful and unsuccessful students. And what we found was folks who are successful, they spend a lot more time learning the concepts and learning the methods, and then a lot less time solving questions, because they don't need to. It's not that they solving questions does any harm to them, but what they realize is if you learn the concepts and methods well, and when saying that you learn the concepts and methods well, if you're evaluating yourself constantly while learning the concepts and methods, when you get to pure practice, you need to solve fewer than 100 questions. So actually, I just answered on Florentia's question. Florentia says, my test is on 25th November. I'm currently working with a private tutor. If I don't make it on my next test, could I improve with your course in 5 weeks? So Florentia, I would love to say yes, I think, but as you can probably see, I'm a very data-driven person, so I'd like to know what your score would be at that particular point in time, and then how many hours are you willing to commit. Most people, I mean, a rule of thumb that I really say is you need about 80 hours for 100 points of improvement, between 80 and 100 hours. So if that's the kind of improvement that you're looking at, and if you can give me about 40 minutes to an hour for every point of improvement that you're looking for, then yes, definitely we can help you improve. Alright guys, if there are no other questions, then I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today. It was wonderful conducting this webinar. I'm sure you guys enjoyed the webinar as well, as I can see from some of the comments and the fact that 70% of you rated this webinar a perfect 10 out of 10. Thank you very much, and go through the free trial, go through the concepts, and see how it takes your understanding to that next level. All right, good luck and have a good day. Study well.